the one and only Mr. Paul Borghese, who is live in New York, and he's agreed to have a chat to us on crime related, and brought to you by Truelifeflix, which we'll be telling you all about during the course of this interview. It's a new streaming service that I'm setting up, and we're going international in January. But Paul has had an amazing career in film, an amazing career in production and direction. So both in front of the camera, behind the camera, and he is, just as I was suggesting only a moment ago, getting wound up and ready for more great achievements. And we're going to see another 20 or 30 years of Paul Borghese doing great character roles, leading roles, producing, directing, and all the rest of it. How are you, Paul? How's New York?
I'm good, David. Thanks for having me. I'm glad we finally able to get each other mutually on the same schedule with the time difference.
Yeah. And also your career. You've been pretty busy the last couple of months. Um, but before we talk about what you've been doing now, I want to start off at the beginning. You were born in New York or outside of New York, and you were raised in New York. You're a real New Yorker. Um, what's been the influence of New York on your career, if at all, or how have you seen the city change over the last 30, 40 years?
I was born in the Bronx actually, and lived there till I was about 9 years old. And our family businesses had been there for forever, for almost 100 years. A men's clothing and suit store and haberdashery called B&G Clothes in the Arthur Avenue, Little Italy section of the Bronx, which the movie The Bronx Tale is about. So I have like roots from real deal Italian American upbringing. And then we moved to up out of the city into Rockland County, New York, which is the suburbs of the city. Then eventually I went back into Manhattan as an adult and lived in Manhattan for and still living in Manhattan for many years. So I'm a
How
true New
long?
Yorker.
Yeah, no, real, and I love the accent. It's very, very Bronxy. How old were you?
But I've lost a lot of it.
Feel free to bang on. Um, how old were you when you woke up one day and said, "I want to get into this crazy industry, this film industry"? Was it an overnight thing, or did it build through school? Did you feel that you had some talent or ability? Tell us the story.
I think I always had even if it was subliminal or a dream kind of you know desire for being in the movie business or being an actor from very young. Like, I just loved movies, and I saw myself being a part of that. But then I didn't go that route. um I went to college, and when I got out of college, I after a few different jobs, I opened up a pasta and pizza joint with one of my best friends. It was called His name was Al, and I'm Paulie. So we called it Al Paulie's Pasta and Pizza, and we had a beer and wine license, and with the bar, and we were in our 20s. And we wound up doing a local commercial for local cable TV. And I got really involved in every aspect of it. What we were going to shoot. I did the voiceover, and I got so involved in it, and I was so excited about the process that I said, I want to do this. I want to get into this. So I went back to school after having gotten my bachelor's degree to study film and television production. And then at the same time, and that was at the Center for the Media Arts in Manhattan near FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology. And at the same time, I started studying acting at on Bank Street in West Greenwich Village. And so I was studying both at the same time and working at our restaurant. And then from there, I just started getting work and doing anything and everything, whether it was in front of the camera or behind the camera. And that was HB Studios that I was talking about on Bank Street. I shouldn't take for granted that everybody knows what I'm talking about. And from there, I just started working.
What was your first breakthrough role that you would say that you felt that this is where I can start my acting career? What was that?
I don't know if I could really say there's any like breakthrough role, because I mean, I still don't see myself as having crossed over, as we say, in the way that I would still like to and hope to, and hopefully will in the future. It just is the matter of when you started out, getting your feet wet as an actor, doing some extra work and things like that. And then when you really started getting like the speaking parts and the bigger speaking parts, even if they were independent, low budget films, you really felt like you were acting. You weren't just on the set and part of background atmosphere, or just wearing a police uniform but walking by as a cop and not really saying anything. And I got like, I mean, I was fortunate early in my career that I started getting some of these roles that were very valuable. I mean, I remember working with Chroma Films early on in my career, and they did a lot of these like uh, the Toxic Avenger trilogies, and Class of Nukem High, and some of these movies that had like cult followings. And Lloyd Kaufman was, the director, and he always called me in for these. This is before I was even in Screen Actors Guild. So I was getting a lot of this, like, non-union initial work that led me into becoming eligible for Screen Actors Guild. And from there, started getting agents and managers and getting the bigger and better work.
Most people who research your life ultimately feel that the role that you played of the famous ball player in '61, Yogi Berra, was a breakthrough role, because I think that film, even though it was HBO, and I don't mean that disparagingly, but I think it was a small screen as opposed to a big screen role. They regard that as a fantastic character study, and you did that really, really well. It was an award-winning show. How important was that in your career, do you feel?
Well, that was definitely the highlight of my career. I guess I didn't label it a breakthrough role as much as it was probably my favorite role I've ever played. To have played Yogi Berra in the HBO movie '61, and yeah, it was HBO, but there was I got to go to all the premieres and all the screenings throughout the country that they had in the theater. So for me, I saw it so many times on the big screen, which Billy Crystal, who directed it, actually was trying to pitch HBO to release it as a theatrical
Yeah.
film and then go on HBO, which HBO really wasn't doing at the time. So uh, we had hoped for it, but they just wound up going on HBO. But it had a huge viewership and a huge following. But that was, you know, such a great experience. I worked the whole summer on that. And, I got to meet Yogi Berra, got to get to know Yogi Berra and his family. Yogi helped teach me how to switch hit because, Yogi was a righty playing in the field, but, he hit lefty up at bat. So I never had done that before. I played ball, but I never done that. So I had to learn how to do that for the movie. Although when you watch the movie, we went through so much training. When you watch the movie, and by the time you watch the whole movie, you realize that only Mantle and Maris are the only Yankees that were ever shown up at bat, because the movie was about them. So there was a lot of training, and the learning to switch hit really didn't come into play because they didn't use any of that footage. Although I was on deck a lot for Roger as Yogi, so being able to just swing the bat on deck and just be natural in that way was helpful.
Then a lot of roles moved you into what I call the true crime genre, including the mob genre, and you started getting a lot of roles. You've appeared in The Sopranos. You had a small part in The Irishman, which I think we'll talk about because it must have been a fantastic experience to be part of
Oh, yeah.
that. And you're currently working, I think, in Gravesend, which is a great mob series, which appears to be taking off, as I understand, in America. Did you feel that this career shift was going to mark you as a guy who was a mob actor, or were you happy with that direction?
No, I don't think I ever really thought that. I mean, as an actor, you really should be grateful for any auditions you get or any roles that you get. And sometimes some actors complain about whatever being pigeonholed, or uh, you know, and being playing the same type of roles. But you're lucky if that happens. I mean, I've had a wide array of different type of character roles. I mean, I've played. I mean, I got my Screen Actors Guild card and became eligible for Screen Actors Guild by playing a nondescript Mideastern terrorist on a soap opera with an accent, with facial hair. And I just, this is going way back. and that what made me eligible was because there was different unions at the time. After merged with SAG, but at the time after was television union, and so I played that. I mean, I played Jewish characters a number of times. In the Bronx is Burning, which was an ESPN miniseries, and it included the whole Son of Sam period of time when there was the serial killings of the Son of Sam, and the last girl that he killed, her name was Stacy Moskowitz, and I played her father, Jerry Moskowitz. He looked Italian. He didn't look as Jewish, but I played him in that. So I've really gotten to play a lot of different type roles, but I played a lot of positive image Italian American roles. I was played the lead in a movie called Vito Bonifaci, which was a very positive image, Italian American character film, and quite a few other films that I could say I was proud of that. I played an Italian American, but it wasn't necessarily a mobster or a wise guy. But I have migrated somehow into that genre very much so, even as a writer and as a director. It's just something I fell into, and there's a certain realism I think that I brought to it as an actor and also as a writer and director. So listen, there's only so much you can really do in that genre, but if they keep doing it, I'll keep. I just auditioned for Tulsa King yesterday. I'll go, play another wise guy in Tulsa King. I'm not going to say no to Stallone.
What a great show! Have you been watching it? Isn't it?
Yeah,
Isn't it? It's really entertaining. The first time I watched it, I couldn't work out whether it was a straight serious drama or it was a black comedy. And then I think he's fused both. He's got there is an
yeah, it's
edge to the
different.
show, but it's also funny.
It's very different.
Mm,
You keep saying, what else could they do? What else could they really do with the mob genre? And
mm.
then somebody does something a little different. I mean, I have a lot of friends that are working on the show that I'm very happy for. Like Chris Caldovino, and he plays Goody, and Dominic Lamberdozzi, who we met actually working on 61. He played Moose Scour, the first baseman, and Dominic, had that big role as the boss's son who becomes the boss, and the whole storyline. And
Mm, mm.
I'm just real happy for them. So I'm gonna watch. It's funny. I watched the whole series so far with my mother. Sometimes I'll sit with my mother and say, "Mom, we're gonna watch this." And so now we have the new season. I think there's 4 episodes. We're gonna start catching up with it.
I'll put in a good word for you with Sylvester if you'd like. I mean,
Yeah, I would love that.
if only,
And
if only.
Gravesend, yeah.
Yeah.
We're just finishing up shooting season 3 for the Gravesend series, which is another mob series set in the 1980s. But I play the head FBI agent on that show, so that's
Yes.
different for me.
Yeah.
And this last season, the stuff that William DeMeo wrote for me is phenomenal for me to get. An FBI agent, they're generally pretty generic. They're after their guy, but this
Mm,
I
mm.
can't say anything, but uh, it's some great stuff that I'm really looking forward to, for getting released soon.
Yeah, no, I've seen a couple of the episodes, and they're really. I think series two, with great respect, is much better. They've fine-tuned the characters, and it's coming together. The plot's coming together, and I can't wait to see you on that. I mean, that's going to be a great character role. But you're either law enforcement or you're on back with the mob. There's no
Yeah, I
middle
mean they're a
ground.
cop or a hood, but yeah, season 2 season 1 was really just like a brief introductory season.
Mm.
I often tell people if you really want to get into the series, you can almost skip season 1 and just when they say previously on Gravesend, it'll bring you right to where you need to be because it
Yeah,
went to another level in season 2, and season 3 is at a whole nother level. And Shaquille O'Neal, Shaq is on the show in season 3, so you have a whole black culture element going on in the show instead, not
yeah,
just the mob. So,
yeah, yeah.
so I just worked on that the other day. One of my last days for season 3. Very, very, very long day, but it was great.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Let's talk about the Irishman because that was a major piece. Um, I want to well, firstly, your experience working with some of the characters, but I also want to talk about the whether it was a gamble that paid off with the selection of the leads. and the storyline casting back. It's a retrospective in many regards. And then they have the likes of De Niro and Pacino, etc., uh, depicting the characters at the end of their lives and then winding back the clock 30, 40, 50 years. But these were very, I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful, but they're very senior gentlemen. They're not spring chickens. And then the makeup brush can only go so far. And a lot of there's been a lot of criticism of the film that it didn't quite pull it off because they just couldn't cast De Niro as who's in his 80s and then portray him as a sort of a 40-year-old. It just didn't work. I mean, I'm interested in your view on that, if you're allowed to talk about it. But tell me about your experience in The Irishman.
Well, that aspect of it was all CGI. It was all computer generated. I remember, when I was doing, well, I was actually in four scenes, but once they start cutting things down, I wound up being in one scene in the final cut of the film, which is heartbreaking. But it's
I know.
you still get paid the same, you still get the same residuals, but it's not just about that. It's about the exposure. But like when I had the scene that I'm in the film with Joe Pesci, just Joe and I, Joe had these little like specks, these little marks all over him, which was to track it, to be able to change his age from like what the age he looked like when I was talking to him to the age they want him to look like in the film.
Mm.
So, I don't know. I personally think that, how people were, say, wow, 3.5 hours, 3.5 hours, but I personally think it was a masterpiece on a certain level, and it
Mm.
was like different for Martin Scorsese. I felt like all of these like characters that he's not written and directed and through the years, it was just like and even the actors, it was like a calmed down version of what you'd expect to see from him, in
Yeah.
some of his films like, Goodfellas and Casino and so forth. So I thought it was kind of nice to see, these actors, especially Joe Pesci, just play this really calm, sharp, old school character. So I really admired that, and I had a great experience working on it. And I had really cool experience with Joe Pesci, because I knew Joe from many years ago, but I hadn't seen him in a long time. And he knew
Yeah.
my father, because the business I told you about. Joe used to buy his suits for my father,
Oh,
and it was a corner restaurant near at my father's place that Joe played the guitar at. Like before he was even in the business. I remember the story about he got called from De Niro when he was at the restaurant to wanted to use him in Raging Bull, cast him in Raging Bull. And he didn't believe that it was really De Niro on the phone. He thought somebody was, pulling a prank, and he hung up on De Niro. It's a true story, and then he called back again, and he wound up doing Raging Bull, which was an amazing film.
yes.
Um, so Joe and I started talking when we were rehearsing, and I said, and he said, "Hey, Paul, I haven't seen you in a long time. How you been? And how's your father doing?" I said, sorry, Joe, he passed away." He goes, "Oh, I didn't know. I hadn't heard." And he talked to me a little bit about that. And he said, "He's such a nice guy, your father. I loved your father, this and that." So, make a long story short, we do a rehearsal, and after Joe and I have just a little exchange of dialogue, hand him an envelope full of money. As I'm leaving, he says, "And don't forget to say hello to your father for me." And I didn't think anything of it. I thought, whatever. It was just the thing that was on his mind about my father. It was a rehearsal. Then we do the first take. He does the same thing again at the end of the scene. So, and I say, okay, whatever. And Scorsese must have done like 18 takes of that. So I didn't say anything. I waited till the very end, and I said, "Joe, let me ask you something. That whole thing about make sure you say hello to your father for me. I don't think that was that something we didn't establish like in the story that in our characters, that you knew my character's father. Was that something storyline wise you were doing, or were you doing that like I felt like that was between me and you thing?" He goes, "No, kid." He goes, "That was between me and you. I was saying hello to your father." He goes, "And you could go home and tell your mother that Joe mentions dad in the movie, and that'll be an Easter. We call them Easter eggs." He goes, "That'll be an Easter egg you'll have for the rest of your life." And Easter eggs are, these little things that are in movies. You know what they are? That
Yeah.
they're personal things that people know or get that are hidden, or So I thought that was a very cool, like kind of generous thing of Joe to do, you
What a
know.
great story. It's, I mean, I remember seeing a documentary about Pesci, and he goes right back to the 1960s. And there was a movie made, filmed in New York about a rock and roll band that was singing a famous song called Peppermint Twist. You know the one I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And Joe
I
Pesci
definitely-
was, that was one of his first roles. He's actually dancing at the front of the group, and he's a young kid. And but you talk about the technology and the dots to use the AI. I think that was a great step forward in one sense and a very gutsy step forward. But the technology, I just don't think the technology had been perfected. And it's a pity because today, I mean, how old's the Irishman? 5 years? Got to be more.
I'm not even sure. I'm not good with that. When people say, "What year did you do this movie? What year did you do that movie?" I couldn't even tell you. Probably, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it's got a few years, but it was sort of a breakthrough for the actual technology. I didn't appreciate that they used the AI. I thought it was just heavy makeup, but I don't think, it's just
No.
my opinion. I don't think that it really worked to the extent that it can work today. Today, it seems seamless. They can do things today that are just extraordinary, and I think it's posed a huge threat to actors, or it's been perceived as a threat to actors and screenwriters alike, who see their craft being hijacked by technology, stolen by technology. I mean, why would you want to pay an Al Pacino a massive fee when you can just put him up on a computer, pay him 1/10 of the fee as a license, use his image, and have a faultless recreation using AI? I mean, it's a huge issue, and I know that the screenwriters went out on strike and the actors went out on strike a couple of years ago, and I think that was the real driving force behind the action, was to make sure that they didn't lose their control over their careers or their craft. Um, you can program AI technology today, and it can draft a screenplay for a TV show or a movie, and it can write it in about 15 minutes at a standard which you could use to pitch. That is the incredible and frightening reality of AI today, and it's really extraordinary. But interesting you mentioned that with the Irishman. Um, tell me about, you're probably a little bit too young to remember the famous Joe Colombo and the Italian American League in New York during the late 60s and early 70s. But you're a very proud Italian American, and you've done a lot of work with your community. Tell me how that's developed, and what are you still doing today in that
Yeah, well,
regard?
I do know about it, um, although I didn't live it. But yeah, I've been very involved with my Italian American community ever since I was young, because my father always was, as a member of the Sons of Italy, or the Sons of Italy in America. And back in 1998, well, there's an Italian actors union, actually, and it really originally it was for there was a lot of Italian speaking theater in New York, so they needed a union. But then, as the Italian speaking theater dwindled, so did the union and the membership. So it had dwindled down to only about, I think, 67 members or something like that. And I was a member. I just joined it to join it, even though I wasn't doing Italian speaking theater. But then a lot of people and actor friends started asking, telling me, "Why don't you run for president? When you run for president, you could do. It's a union. We could do something with this." So I did, and I won the election in 1998. And so I was president, and I reinvented it. I renamed it and reinvented it GIA, GIAA. So it sounded like an Italian name, the Guild of Italian American Actors, instead of the Italian Actors Union. And I was president for 4 years. And one of the first members that came on was James Gandolfini, because we lived in the same building on Bleecker Street in West Greenwich Village. And we were just starting The Sopranos, just starting. And I was like, Jimmy, you got, everybody's looking up to you and stuff. I'm trying to build this thing. I go, you guys, would you become a member of this? I know you don't need it. You just got the lead in an HBO series. But he goes, yeah, sure. He wrote me a check. He joined. He filled out the application. And then I built it up to over 500 members and expanded. It's not just actors, but, writers and directors and
Yeah.
producers. I was
Yeah.
very involved in the Italian American community. At the time, we did a lot with 9/11 and Ground Zero with Italian American actors. When that all happened, got everybody involved in donating time towards that. And I continue to be a member of the Sons of Italy for many years now. And there's an Italian feast that I founded with several other members about in 2010. And so for 15 years, I was the entertainment director, the MC, did the PR. I produced all the video promotional stuff, so I ran the feast. And this was the first year that I retired from it after 15 years that I'm not doing it anymore. I didn't do it last month. So I still stay very involved in Italian American community. We were very involved recently in saving a bronze statue of Christopher Columbus that was in Virginia. And back when some of the stuff was happening, it got defaced and it got dragged into a river and left in a river.
Yeah.
And some people from the organization in Virginia and ourselves, we got it after several years pulled out of the river and refurbished, and we brought it over to our Sons of Italy lodge, and we have it there now with a beautiful bronze plaque telling the story and just reinstating his place in society, which recently our government just did as well with the national holiday remaining Christopher Columbus Day.
Good for you. That's great stuff. What's the future of the Italian Americans in New York? Are they is the population thriving? I've read that Little Italy was in decline. Is that or is it turning around a
Yeah,
bit?
I mean, Little Italy in Manhattan and Little Italy in the Bronx has shrunk. Little Italy in Manhattan borders Chinatown.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like you've got sort of an overlap of Chinatown coming more so into Little Italy, and you just have like the earlier generations dying off, and people moving out of the areas and not necessarily wanting to live in the same Little Italy's. So you go like the Italian feast, like the famous San Gennaro feast in Manhattan, Little Italy, and you don't even have as many authentic Italian vendors. You have different all nationalities serving the Italian food,
Yeah.
and so I mean that's changed a lot. I mean it's hard to preserve it as to the degree and to the level that it once was. And then you have a lot of Albanian uh, people taking over Italian restaurants. So you have a lot of Italian restaurants and Albanians have a very good way of acting like they're Italian or being believable as Italians. I can't tell you how many Albanians literally have their whole stories, the town they came from in Italy, and they speak Italian fluently. And so, Albanians are major restaurant owners now in the New York area. They really have thrived in the restaurant business.
Okay, here's a really hard question for you. When I come to visit you one day in Manhattan, what's the best pizza place and the best authentic Italian restaurant in Manhattan?
Uh, well, I would say John's Pizza on Bleecker Street, where I
Cool.
live in West Greenwich Village,
Yeah.
is my absolute favorite. You can't get a slice. You have to go there and, you got to get a pie but it's just really the best. Anybody that I've taken to different places, from out of town and let's try this one, let's try that one. Everybody finds it to be their favorite. And then as far as, really authentic Italian, and they keep changing. I've had favorite restaurants that have gone out of business, or changed over. So right at the moment, I couldn't say what the Trattoria Spaghetto was my favorite Italian restaurant on the corner of Carmine Street and Bleecker Street that I used to go to 3 times a week. And they changed over. They changed hands, so now it becomes, okay, what's next? But so many of them are commercialized in New York, and there's so much tourism now. You used to have a lot of restaurants where you go there and it was like New Yorkers were there, but now you go and it's just like everybody from everywhere is going to them. So I don't have my real favorite spot right now. I have to find a new one.
completely understand that. We had our favorite restaurant, which we were going to all the time, Italian, and then we found out that it suddenly just closed down. They boarded up the whole shop, and then we found the guy
Yeah.
running it was, the machines that you swipe your credit card on. They read the credit card. Well, this guy had got in early one morning and he'd hacked them and he reprogrammed them so that they went straight into his bank account.
Oh,
He
yeah.
he was skimming the entire take for about 3 weeks
Wow.
before suddenly someone realized that there was no money coming into the restaurant and they jumped on him and the whole thing got closed down, which was a
It's
terrible
scary.
tragedy.
It's
Scary.
scary what you can get away with these days. You know.
Yeah. Um, Looking back at your career, great career. You want to focus on an equal balance between acting and behind the camera work, producing, directing, or is it just where the opportunities come up, or whatever the exciting projects that are on offer, or do you have a preference?
You know, I've often been asked, would you like better acting or directing? And it's kind of a hard question to answer because I mean, I love both. Um, the thing about directing is, you're involved in every aspect of the creative process. So I do love that, that you're just involved in every aspect of it. Um, but then again, sometimes it's nice with acting to just prepare, rehearse, go do my job, and be able to leave and be done, and not leave my work at work, so to speak, until they call me back for the next thing. But I think uh, directing again, there's a whole nother aspect to it, a creative aspect to it that I really love, but I really like the process of if I'm involved in the writing, moving into the directing,
Yeah.
taking something someone had directed and somebody else wrote and directing it is different than if you're involved in the writing because as you're writing it, you're feeling it, you're saying these things, you're becoming those characters as you're writing, and when it comes time to shoot it, it's like you're just seeing it come to life, and you have such a vision for it that it's just you have an insatiable appetite for like being like perfecting it. Whereas if someone else wrote it, it's there's might be your vision of what's perfected or is as good as it could be, but the writer might have a different vision or the producer might have a
Yeah.
different vision. But I love the acting. I mean, I it's I just like having a nice mix of the two. But when I'm directing, I won't play a big role. Some directors will. I don't know how somebody could say they're, you know, direct playing like let's say a lead in a movie and directing it. I mean, it's just you can't physically really do it, or give everything to the directing that you would. So I would only take on like a small role that was a limited amount of time as a director. I would never, I think that's kind of greedy to take too much of that screen time when you're directing because I don't want to go into the details of why, but it's just
I understand what you're saying. If you
it's
look
not as
back at your
doable as people think it is.
no, I get it.
I think you're doing a disservice. I mean, in Hollywood, it's one thing because you got a million people on set, you've got a million people that know your vision, and a million people watching your back. But on independent projects, taking on both is sort of unfair. You're running back and forth and watching the scenes. Let me see it. Let me see it. Let me see. It's all time spent and money spent instead of being able to move on because you saw it while it was happening, but you can't see it while it's happening because you're in the scene.
get it.
If that makes sense.
If you look back at your career, what do you think is your favorite moment, either as an actor or as a director or producer? What's your favorite role? I mean, is
Oh, um, my favorite moment. Oh wow, I never really stopped to thought. I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. I guess fortunately, there've been many moments. I think we talked about the highlight of my career being playing Yogi Berra. I think one of the my favorite moments was when my agent called me and said, you got that part. They called and the part for the baseball movie, and I was like, but some time had gone by, and I'm like, you mean Yogi Berra? And she says, yeah, you got it. They called, and I really thought that it was gone. I thought that enough time had passed. and I was like, that was like I was in LA at the time on another shoot, and I remember being absolutely ecstatic. I mean, that was probably the best phone call I ever got, as far as in my career. But I can't think of. I mean, I've, on the other side of it, I've directed some really well-known A-list actors that were so generous, in the work with me, and was so what would I say, agreeable or open to everything I had to say as a director, and didn't look at it as I've directed Alec Baldwin, and Alec was like all about what I wanted, and is this okay, Paul? And do you like this? You want me to do this a little different? Armand Desante, who's a good friend of mine, is incredibly collaborative, and so that's been wonderful getting to. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to direct, some of these big people, Danny Glover. As I start thinking of all these other people that I've had the opportunity, these actors. So there's great pleasure in that as well. So there's a long list of actors I've worked with that have highlighted my career as a director.
Do you have any regrets or moments where you thought back, if only I had done something a little bit different, or are you happy with the way it's all played out?
Uh, I had a very small part on The Sopranos, but it was in the second season, and who knew that it was going to go as long as it did for as many many seasons as it did. So in hindsight, I would have passed on that role and waited for something bigger and better to come up, because there were so many more opportunities after that I probably stood a good chance. The casting directors knew me, uh, some of the writers knew me, some of the,
Yeah.
so they've seen me. And so, yeah, that's one thing I wish I had passed on and waited for something, bigger on the show.
Yeah. No, I understand. I was going to ask you this question, but I'm going to answer it for you, which is a little bit unusual because one of the questions that I love asking is, what's your takeaway? What do you love? What do you hope that your audiences get from seeing you on the screen? And then when I watched your reel again the other day, and I've seen a lot of your work, put me down as a fan. I think that people see you as totally relatable, and you are totally authentic, and you represent people who are natural, not people who are up themselves or you know obnoxious. A lot of the characters you play, even when you're a bad guy, there's still a niceness about you. I hope that doesn't sound too crazy, but that's my reaction when I watch you perform. Is that something that you try to achieve, or is it just you?
I think I try to, bring a real, I mean, I think every actor brings a part of themselves to their roles. I mean, how could you not, unless, I mean, if you're playing something that's so far off from who you are, you're still you. So there's part of you that's there, but I try to bring a realism to everything I do. I don't ever want to come across as a caricature, uh, when I play some of the wise guys or the mob guys. And, some actors do that. They want to talk more like this, and they want to say, "You over there, I'm gonna, come over here. Don't you say that." I never do that. I mean, I always try to, think like just more seriously, and again, try to bring realism to it. It's funny you were looking at my I have you must be looking at an old reel, because I have such an outdated actor's reel, and believe it or not, after all the work I've done as a director, I don't have a director's reel, which is kind of insane.
Got to
People
put
like, you
it
don't have.
together. You need
I
one.
just, you're working and you're busy with
Yeah,
the work, and
yeah.
it's something you have to really slow down and take the time. So I have to get some help with somebody that kind of just objectively, can help with that. But yeah, I mean, and I've been told that before too, that I bring a certain realism to the roles I play. So I take a lot of pride in that, and
Yeah.
so I appreciate that you've captured that in some of the work that you've seen of mine.
Oh no, even when some of the earlier roles when you were doing was it Law and Order, or you were playing a police prosecutor or a
Yeah,
policeman?
I've actually there's different Law and Order, so I've played a number of different roles. I've
Yeah,
played not only a uniform
yeah,
cop, but I've also played a detective. So I've played a few different roles. I actually was in Law and Order. Uh, 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 what's the criminal? The newer one, criminal. I'm blanking on the newer one. And what is it called? The new Law and Order with I'm blanking on the one that's organized
Oh,
crime.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Organized
yeah.
crime. Um, but the scenes that they wound up like cutting this whole big scene was I was playing like the maitre d' owner of Rayo's restaurant, which in real life was actually a good friend of mine, Frankie Pellegrino, but he unfortunately died well, way before his time. Um, so yeah, I mean, even that I've done like a lot of detective and uh, cop roles, and I just always try. I mean, I observe people. I'm a big observer. I watch people sometimes, and I'll love to sometimes just sit in an airport and just watch people, and you pick up things that somebody does that's just a little different or something, and sometimes I'll bring that to a character, a little tick or a little something somebody did every time they said something, and you just try to remember it and to make the characters unique but not over the top.
When I watch you play a cop, I mean, I think to myself, yeah, I'd go up and talk to you because you're a nice cop. You're not not the scariest. If you had young kids coming up to you today and saying, Paul, I'm thinking of going into the industry. I want to be an actor. Would you tell them it's a great life, it's a hard life? Why don't you go and open a restaurant and make pizzas? What would you tell them?
Well, I get a lot of. I just had a big, huge conversation with a young girl that a friend of mine's friend's daughter is going to college now for that, and they asked if I would talk with her. And usually, I get a lot of calls. People that say, "Could you talk to my son or my daughter or my
Yeah.
niece or my nephew or whatever it might be because they want to go into the business and this and that." And I said, "Well, I will." I said, "But I'm going to be completely honest with them. They said, "Well, what do you mean?" I go, "Well, I'm going to tell them if there's anything else you could think of that you could do that you might be happy with, as a career, do it because this is a very, very tough, very, very competitive business." And I do tell them, I say, "Look, if you want to have a very small percentage of actors, very small percentage of directors, producers, make a living doing that. So if you want to have a normal life and get married and have children and have a normal schedule, do something else because you're really going to have to commit to doing a lot of things for free in the beginning. I mean, there's not most careers you don't do that. You learn how to do what you do, you become qualified and sort of certified, and you go to work. In this business, people are working as productions assistants for free. They're working as actors on short films for free. They're doing all of this, and it's a big investment of your time. And once you do start working, like I mean, even these people that are Teamsters and they're fortunate enough to be in unions and they're working a lot on films and they're making good money. I mean, a lot of them are there that they got to be the first to get there and the last to leave on a set. And the normal production day on a film, if you're lucky enough to be on a film, is 12 hours plus an hour for lunch. So that's 13 hours plus your travel time. So if you're working on a feature film and you have a family and you're working every day for, a month or 2 months or 3 months or however it is, you're coming home and all you want to do is take a shower, get in bed, and you're waking up for the next day. So I tell them, you really have to think about that because it is a dream, but at the same time, it could be a nightmare when you get what you want. You say you have to be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. Do you
So,
think that you got the work balance formula right in your life?
you know, I, I mean, I was married for 12 years, and my ex-wife was a makeup artist, and I helped get her into that union, and she had a very nice job. She was working for a network. She was working for CBS and Entertainment Tonight, and so we had a real good balance because she was doing that, and I was acting and doing all my acting and directing, and but going independently, I went from project to project, and then I'd have downtime, and I feel like I've always had a good balance. I don't think I was ever too overwhelmed, and at the same time, I don't think I've hit too slow of a period, where I was in a rut where I was like, oh geez, am I gonna ever, pull out of this? So I think I've been lucky. I feel fortunate and blessed that I've been able to make a
Yeah.
career, make a living out of doing what I do for all these years. You
Yeah.
know.
No, I think you've done brilliantly, and the best is yet to come. What have you got planned? I mean, are there any projects that you can share that you're working on, or what's the outlook over the next few years for you?
Well, right now, I'm trying to write again. It's funny you were talking about, AI, and I was talking the other day about how much I'm trying to rack my brain about what do I want to write. I don't really want to write another mob movie, although I do have a great, 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 great idea for a comedy, that I think would do well, but I have to decide, do I want to put the time and effort into that or something else? Like, so I have outside of the city family and a home or a second home in a small historical town that's a wonderful town. So I kind of want to write something about a small town. And so I was talking about wanting to write, and they were like, well, why don't you go to just do Chat GPT? And I'm like, it's not the same thing. I mean, like you were saying that. I mean, it's not the same thing as right. Yeah, you might get a draft, but if you got to go in and you got to really do your vision of it, your descriptions of the characters and the locations and all that. So I'm going to try to sit down and write something that, because I haven't really raised money for films. I've been fortunate that everything I've directed, mostly 75% of that was probably William DeMeo with the projects I've done with him. He's like a magician when it comes to raising money for films and the TV series. And I've always directed for him, although I'm not directing the Gravesend series. He is. So this would be something where I would go to people finally and say, no, this is the one. This is the one. I haven't come to you before because I was waiting for this one. Um, I hope I stayed on. You said battery low. But I'm working on something right now. It's actually a producer from Las Vegas called me, and he has a script, and he wants me to direct the movie. He wants me to do rewrites on it, and he wants me to direct it, which will be shot entirely in Las Vegas. It's a mob movie, So if I
Yeah.
do it, the mob movie, and he came to me because he's seen a lot of my other work and you know uh, likes what I've done in that genre. So I'll probably take that on and do that, and then write my own project. In between all of that.
Fantastic. I hear you about your battery level. I want to segue if I can,
No,
and
we're good. It was 20%, so we're fine.
okay, okay. That we have a mutual friend. In fact, he introduced me to you, and I'm talking about Gunnar Lindblom. And I told you that I'm producing a documentary about his life, which is quite an extraordinary story. And you're aware recently that he has literally had some very disturbing, life-changing news about his health, which he's gone public, and
Yes.
he's in serious trouble. And I was hoping that you might just tell us how you met Gunnar and maybe just a few words of encouragement for him, because with your consent, I want to put this as a bit of an outtake at the end of the documentary with a few other close friends of his that can give him some encouragement whilst this is the fight of his life.
I'm glad you brought him up because I would have as well. We met Gunnar Lindblom and I met on social media, just from talking, and he was reaching out to me trying to get me to read his book, which I have here,
To be
To
a
Be a
king.
King.
Yep.
Yeah, which of course you're very familiar with.
Yes.
And he sent it to me, and as you can see, it's very thick. So he sent it to me and says, could you read, you can just read an excerpt of it, or listen to that. And I think it could make a good movie in it or a series. And so we talked a while after that, and then I read his work, and here's a guy who had done a lot of time, had lived some of that life, and found God on the inside, and really it was really a solid, good-hearted, generous man. I mean, he was very inspirational, and I bonded with him, as soon as we started talking. And then I read his work and I said, you're a damn good writer. You're a good writer. I love that. I don't know what I could do with it because this is a studio project. This is an independent film. This is something the studio would need to get involved with. I said, but I'll help you in any way I can. So I started trying to make connections for him and with him, and we stayed friends. And then when he came into town for to work on the documentary, when you were shooting some stuff with Armand, upstate New York, we went to meet and hang out and spend some time together. And he's just a real good guy. And it's tragic because he's so energetic. He's got so much energy, and he gives off such a positive energy. With all he does with his hunting and his fishing and his love for his wife Maria. He's just such a passionate guy. And then to hear that he got this a rare case of cancer that they're calling terminal, which I don't even want to use that word because I believe he's going to be one of these miracle cases. So I'm in his corner, and as there's I have to say that it's called givesendgo.com. They have GoFundMe's for different people. And, right now people are trying to raise some money for him because he's having trouble with health insurance.
Yes.
So I would hope that more people, they might not see this until it's a ways down the line, but I would hope some, people, if they see this sooner than later, if they go to givesendgo.com and look up Gunnar Allen Lindblom in the search and donate something, anything, whatever it is, $5, $10, $25, $50, because he's having a lot of trouble with health insurance, which is a shame because he's not getting the treatment that he could be getting or should be getting. And the really scary part is that we all don't know what the best way to really treat cancer is now. There's so many new things that we're finding out. I mean, we're all finding out about statins and how statins might not be good for us. And now we're finding out about cancer and how bad chemo might not be helping us and might be killing us faster. So I pray for him, and I'm glad you brought his name up because I admire him. I love the man. I would do anything for him. And I hope that when the documentary comes out, we're sitting in the audience together and we're saying, look, I told you, you're a miracle, man.
All from your mouth to God's ear, as we say. I mean, there's probably an Italian way of saying that as well, but thank you for sharing that, and I'm sure it'll mean the world to Gunnar to hear that from you. We're working as hard as we can. We're hoping to get the final cut ready before Christmas. We're hoping to talk to a number of distributors to get the show out so he can enjoy it and watch it. And I want people to hear about his story because it is quite an inspirational story. So
Absolutely.
I call these interviews, which I'm very privileged, and I love to do them. I'm not really a professional interviewer, but I call them Live with the Legends because you're a legend, not in your own mind, but you're a legend. You've worked your entire career in film and directing and producing, and you've left a legacy. You've had some wonderful roles. And I'm sure we've only touched on some of the experiences that you've had, but I'm so glad that we've been able to have this talk finally. And we'll be editing this and putting it on a whole raft of social media. People who don't know you, for example, in the United Kingdom. I've got a big site over there, which we'll put this on and hopefully get the Paul Borghese fan club stirring from the heart of London town. People wanting to see your stuff, and I hope it contributes to a general elevation of your exposure, which I'd love to be part of. But it's been an absolute pleasure to finally talk to you, and I thank you so much for your time. I know you've had a big long day and you're working hard. Stay strong, my friend, and so happy to share your thoughts also about our mutual friend, Gunnar Lindblom, and we pray that he will be, as you say, the miracle story. But thank you so much for your time, and I'll be speaking to you soon about other bigger and better projects, I hope.
Happy to do this show, and you're as good as any host I've been interviewed by.